Fresh in the Flesh tattoo. Hip Pantry. River Monster Comics. Perfect Spot Tattoo. And our new sponsor, Humble Reaper. All proud sponsors of the Movie Dawgs.
1988. The crime rate in the United States rises 400%. 1991. The United States Police Force is formed. 1997. New York City is a walled maximum security prison. John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Kurt Russell. Lee Van Cleef. Ernest Borgnine. Donald Pleasance. Isaac Hayes. Susan Hughley. Harry Dean Stanton as Brain. And Adrienne Barbeau as Maggie. John Carpenter's Escape.
And welcome to a new episode of the Movie Dawgs Show. We're still covering the 80s, folks. We're still on the DeLorean time machine, and we're traveled back into time. This time, we're going to be talking about the John Carpenter classic, Escape from New York. So sit back, type in the time codes, get that flux capacitor going and revved up. We are the 80s, and this is the Movie Dawgs Show. All right, folks, we are still in the decade of decadence, the decade of awesomeness, the 1980s, and we are going to talk about, as we said at the top of the show, John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Now, this was, I believe, John Carpenter's fourth theatrical film, not counting Elvis. That was a TV movie, but this was the second time that he and Kurt Russell got to work together, which, of course, they would go on and work together maybe 3 or 4 more times in more great films. This was originally a project that Carpenter had originally wrote a draft in college, and then he enlisted the help of another great director, of Nick Castle, who previously worked with Carpenter on Halloween as the original Michael Myers. We all know Nick Castle went on to make his own great films, one being The Last Starfighter. Of course, he came back in himself into the role of the Shape when it came to certain parts of the new Halloween trilogy. But again, Snake Plissken is one of my favorite characters in cinema. I have an action figure of him. I guess you would call a retro style action figure from NECA, and from also from McFarlane's Movie Maniacs line from the late 90s. He's just one of my favorite characters. He's just one of those. He's the type of guy that a lot of guys that grew up kind of being a loner like me really wanted to be. A guy who had no care in the world and just wanted to do his thing and make his way and make his money. And Snake Plissken is that type of person. I cannot remember the name of the medical terminology that it is, but there is a type of function that a human being has that is actually disgusted with his own race. He's, and I can't remember what it's called. I failed to look it up, but he's that type of person that's that's just an enigma, an island of his own, as Carpenter and Kurt Russell had described him. This movie was made, I think, under $1,500,000 of that statue back in them days. This is the early 1980s. and it made a big profit. I mean, Carpenter was really good at keeping the budget down very minimum and making the film look like it is a $20 million film. And the film, oddly enough, there's some scenes that were shot in New York, like on Manhattan Island, on Liberty Island, and certain spots. But majority of this film was filmed in downtown St. Louis, an area of St. Louis in like the Mission District or the Warehouse District or whatever, industrial district that that was burnt out due to a riot or some type of fire that got caused. And they were able to utilize that. Dean Cooney, who was one of he used the lack of lighting out there. He was able to, as a director of photography, was able to make fires and, put lights off in the distance to make it look like a very more desolate place than it already was in real life. And, the story goes, this was based in 1997. Of course, 1997 is 20 years, almost 30 years past. So it's, it was always unique to, when you catch up into, those years in those futuristic films or dystopian type films to see how thankfully progress didn't lower its standards some, if you go by today's standards. But of course, what's one of the best things, and always a good thing with Carpenter, he always gets a really great ensemble cast to always surround the lead of his films. Kurt Russell got surrounded by some great actors in this film. You had the legendary Western actor in Lee Van Cleef, and this is one of his first roles in a while, high-profile roles. And you had the legendary singer-songwriter and actor from, voice. He played Chef, Isaac Hayes. Carpenter's wife at the time was in this film, Adrienne Barbeau, and of course, again, you had Donald Pleasance showing up in as the president of the United States with a British accent or a Welsh accent. I can't remember which part of United Kingdom he's from. And then, of course, you just saw Ernest Borgnine, Academy Award winner Ernest Borgnine, playing the character of Cabby. And then, of course, Harry Dean Stanton. I mean, that man played everything in the 80s. Dads, bums, alcoholics, smartasses, patriots. He was everywhere in the 1980s, and he was a great character actor. He just recently passed away a few years back. But again, you had this great group, Tom Atkins, who had been in the Fog previously. And then, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis does the voice narration at the beginning of the film. And some of the voice work here and there on this film. So, Carpenter always kept it close when it came to a lot of people he worked together with. Of course, Deborah Hill, his producer on this film, and they were a great pair. I mean, they themselves were for a while romantically involved, and but they were able to keep it professional and giving us great films over the years, even after Escape from New York. About 15 years later, I believe it was, in the 90s, a sequel was emerged. Because, Kurt Russell, because of rights issues also, but Kurt Russell wanted to play Snake again, and he should have. He should have played Snake Plissken at least 4 or 5 times total, honestly, in my opinion. This is one of those lost, film series that, due to legal battles or whatever and everything, people couldn't get their shit together. But, again, I just love the character of Snake, and I always joke that if I still had a full head of hair, my hair would still look like Kurt Russell's to this day, because the man had a head of hair and he knew how to make that hair shine, folks. And that's definitely would have been the hairstyle I would still kept. I tried to do it very often as in my youth, have the same hairstyle. But again, the action itself, I mean, it was one of the. It was a very low-budget film that made it look like it was a $20 million film to this day. If you look at the radar sonar scene that when Snake was flying into New York onto the World Trade Centers, which you prominently see in this film, the radar scene was actually done with gaffy tape. the models were lined out with that tape and everything, and shot with a reflective light. That was not a computer-generated image that people thought it was. I thought it was for the longest time until, I was watching the behind the scenes and they were explaining how that particular scene was made. There were so many, small great moments. There's not one huge moment that you have, but there's one, or every character kind of stood out on their own. But this one character, I can't remember. He's the Duke of New York's, head henchman. And he had the big wild hair and he looked like a super meth head is what you basically can describe him as. And he dominated that scene with his chuckle of a laugh, or the just the expression and his breathing. He would go, and he would have this. I'm not going to do the laugh justice, but he would go, he would just dominate the scenes that he was in. And he was just, as I said, it was just those small little subtle clicks, I guess you would say, that own the scenes. I said the movie was just, it didn't have one bombastic moment that stood out, and it just, every bit of it was a big reminder. Of course, having Air Force One being hijacked and flown into a building in New York will set off some, remembrance of what happened, over 20 years ago in the beginning of this century. But again, we're reminded how, sometimes life can imitate art. But I have to also really point out the score. Again, Carpenter, with the help of Alan Halloworth, who would accompany him in a few more of his projects over the years, would just, the theme to Escape from New York, it's just a simple synthesizer with some beats, but it's such a memorable sound, just like the Star Wars theme, or the Indiana Jones and Jaws, or Superman. It was subtle, simple 4 beats, I believe what it was, and Carpenter was able to, just knock out another amazing score with his films. That's another thing. His scores have become almost as famous, if not more famous, than the movies themselves. And he's actually gone on tour, which I would love to see John Carpenter live playing this music. But, it has just been one of those experiences. It was so hard to find on VHS for a while, too, especially in the late 80s. I found a copy. I was able to, I lucked out one time, just happened to shop, and it was towards the end of the run of VHS. It's like the late 90s. And then, of course, I was able to find it on a 2-disc, which I still have, is a 2-disc DVD set that had a bunch of extras and the lost opening of the film. Now, if you ever get a chance, look up the lost reel to Escape from New York. It kind of sets a different tone, and sets a different tone for the character of Snake Plissken. So if you guys do check it out. But I do have to say the one scene is like when they're supposed to be in Madison Square Garden, and Snake Plissken is fighting a real life wrestler named Ox Baker, in a battle to the death. That's a nice little memorable scene. And I do have to say that the sequel kind of mimics, is kind of a bit of a remake plot line. It's not the best, but it's still fun to watch. So I do recommend you try to check out Escape from LA as well. But again, I have always been a big fan of this film. And again, if you haven't had a chance, do check it out. It doesn't matter what format you watch it, what is it's physical media or streaming or anything of that nature. Check out Escape from New York. You won't be disappointed. As the effects dated, it's from the 1980s. Each film from each of its decades, it's always going to be dated compared to nowadays. But nowadays, a lot of people are going back to those practical effects because sometimes, CGI just doesn't work for a certain film. Again, I always thought that this film also gave George Carlin the great idea for one of his best live sketches is about blocking off or fencing off the square states and everything, so you can put the criminals in there and put it on pay-per-view just to make a little extra money for the mob and the Defense Department. But again, folks, just check out this film. It's absolutely wonderful. Wonderful cast. Amazing score. It got Kurt Russell, his adult acting career, really going, especially in the 80s. Everybody who don't remember, Kurt Russell was a Disney contracted kid star. People forget that. And he had his own little trilogy, the Computer That Wore Tennis Shoes trilogy, or a series of films that he played, and a few other things. Also, The Shaggy Dog, and check out, Kurt Russell's filmography as a young child star. It's actually very impressive, and I think he was even in Old Yeller too. But again, this gave Kurt Russell that boost that he can lead a film, and that he ended up doing that, especially in the 80s and definitely in the 90s. Kurt Russell's, star power really shined in the 90s. But again, the one thing that will say that does stand out is the ending in this film and the way Snake Plissken handled the president after people dying to save his life, and how arrogant he still remained at the end of the film. Snake very calmly asked him a question, and he got the reply that he was expecting. And then, not to give it away too much, but Snake kind of walked away with something and destroyed it in the process, making the president eventually look like a fool. I said, watch the film, you'll understand. And you get a nice little smirk of satisfaction from Snake. That's really cool. While he's walking away, smoking a cigarette, blowing it out. I actually wrote a scene kind of inspired by that scene in one of my screenplays, and that I always hoped one day to film. But again, it was it was an anticlimactic scene in a way as well, but a really good way. Done in a really good way. Carpenter had such a great, anticlimactic, go to your own interpretation type of way to end a film. So, but again, check it out. Escape from New York. 5 paws down. No doubt about it. I laid down the law of the lands here in the doghouse, folks. All right, folks. Well, that's all the time I got here for the Movie Dog Show. Again, thanks for watching, folks. If you haven't, like, subscribe, share this video throughout all social media. You can check us out through all social media that you possibly can find. And you can check us out. There's also an audio version of this particular subject, Escape from New York, on Spotify. I don't do them at the same time. I kind of change it up a little bit. I don't record the same thing at the same time, so it may sound a little different, or I maybe brought up something different that I didn't bring up here. So do check it out on Spotify. It's free, folks. The Movie Dogs is on Spotify. And also, do not forget our sponsors from, you go to the Perfect Spot Tattoo on Highway 44, West Inverness. Check them out on Instagram, Facebook. And Sarah Ritter, Tattoo Sarah. She's from the Perfect Spot Tattoo. You can check her out on Instagram and on TikTok. She's an amazing tattoo artist. Also, folks, you can check out River Monster Comics in Denellen, Florida. Absolutely one of the finest places you'll ever go to if you're in the Marion County area. Joshua Church, amazing guy. Check him out. And also, folks, check out Tattoo Tony Lloyd at Fresh in the Flesh Tattoo. Also on Gulf to Lake Highway in Inverness, Florida. Check him out on Instagram and on Facebook. And then while you're at it, folks, if you like spicy sauce, and that taste, you want it to be knocked right out of your mouth, go to Humble Reaper at humblereaper.com. Trust me, they will slap the taste right out of your mouth. And, of course, folks, as I always say, being green has never been so easy. Check out Hemp Pantry at hemppantry.net. They are one of the leaders in CBD, chewables, vapes, and all oil essentials, folks. Check them out at hemppantry.net. They're located in Inverness, Florida, right off of Highway 44. And finally, folks, I want to check out Quality Plastering. For 40 years, family run and operated. How do I know that? Because they're family too. And they are the best at what they do, folks. They work all over Citrus County, and they've got a reputation of being the best. So check out Quality Plasterings. All right. Well, that's it for the Movie Dog Show. Again, hit that like button. Share to every possible media format you possibly can in this video. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and hit that notification bell. All right. We're going to still be in the 80s all summer long, folks. So check us out next month. Keep an eye out for some trailers. And thanks for watching. Please keep on watching, folks. Bye.